Welcome back. In our previous session, we have used an input file. We have read the contents of the file and we have printed them onto the console using a tlog_row component. Now we will see what are the further additions that we can do to this job. Well, all is set now. So we have our input file, and now this is where we have passed the path of the input file that we wanted to read. We have seen that there are two options. You can go ahead and use this ellipse and then choose the directory and then that populates here, or you can always come back and type it. When you are typing it, it is important to remember that the path should always be between these quotes. So whatever the value that you are giving as an input or as a property to the component must always be enclosed within the double quotes. Best practice or the common mistake that we do. Sometimes we go ahead and delete this because we want to give it a different field separator. Let's say you have a pipe separated file. By default, Talend gives it in a semicolon. So you want to edit it, so you just delete it and then you give it a pipe. This is wrong. This will give you an error. So you always need to specify in between quotes. So now that we are dealing with comma separated file, I give the separator as comma. So this field separator is the tab or is the property where you pass the input field separator that it is there in your file. If it's a comma, give it as comma. If it's a pipe, give it as pipe. If it's colon, give it as colon, ampersand, whatever it is. Talend would be able to read it. Now, this is your row separator. As we have seen in our data set, we had 5 rows. So, this indicates, the /n indicates the new line row separator. This is the common standards that we follow. This is a row separator and then this is the field separator. Coming back to header. Header indicates if there is a header column present in our data set. If we look at our data file, we have a header column. This column indicates the name of the column. As this will become our header, we have given the header as 1. In case we don't have header in our file that we are reading, we can skip this. So we can give this to 0. Same is applicable for footer. If you have a footer line and if you don't want to read that footer line, give this number as 1. What this would do, it would skip the last line that it is there in the data file and it would read only till the last but one line so that you skip up the footer line. Now what is limit? Let's say you have 100 rows in your data set and you want to read only the top 10 rows. So if you limit the number to 10, it would only read the top 10 rows. Let's go ahead and see this. So now that you have 5 rows starting with John to Bill, I want to read only till Robert. So that's the third one. So I would go ahead and give this as 3. So what is that I should see? I want to see only till the top 3 rows. Let's go ahead and run this. Everything remains same. Come to run. This is our previous run statistics. Clear this. Clicking on clear will help you to clear this console output. Whatever the output that we have from our previous execution of the job, clear will help in clearing that. Clear this up. Go ahead and click on run. There you see, we have only the first 3 rows that are generated in our data set. So this is because I have used the limit property of the t file input delimited. This is when you want to read only the top set of rows in a given data set. This kinds of helps in filtering the data, but only on the order. You have further components like tfilter component where we specify further conditions of filtering the data. But in case if you want to filter the data only on the order and you want to read only the top set of rows, go ahead and use limit option. Limit, whatever the number that it is there, it's the inclusive. So it reads till the third row. It doesn't skip the third row. So it reads the first, second and third rows. As we have seen, we have the first, second and third rows. In case you want to skip the third row also, you have to give it as 2. So that's the inclusive. The limit part is the inclusive of this number as well. That's about this one. So here you have some other checkboxes. This will help in skipping the empty rows, and this is when you're reading a zip file, it will help in uncompressing the zip file. And this is when, if you have error, let's say you're saying you're giving a path and there is no input data file that it is there, this component fails, and this checkbox will help in killing the job if there is a error in the component. These are like error handling techniques we will see during error handling sessions. But for now, let's leave it like this and go ahead and check for other options. Before moving to the other component, we have major component, major property. This is edit schema. Click on this. What does this do? Edit schema is where you specify the schema or the column names that you have in the data file. How does this help? This is where you pass an input to the component saying that, hey, I have 5 columns to be read from my data, and these 5 columns are this, or I have 3 columns to be read from my data. First column corresponds to a string and second column corresponds to a age, which is an integer, and third column is for a string again. So this helps in reading the schema. So whenever you're creating a table in a database, you know that you have to pass a schema or a metadata for the table so that the data is stored in the same format. It's same here as well. So you want to give the schema of the data file that you're reading. Whatever the columns that are present in your data file, they have to be configured here with their corresponding data types. Key is where you want to check if this is a primary key. This will help in duplication. That means you cannot have name or a ID value. Usually you go by IDs for keys. So you cannot have 2 records with the same ID. So this acts as a primary key. So if you specify whatever the column, let me say I also have an ID, and if I specify this as a primary key or a key, this makes this ID column as a primary key. For now, because I don't have an ID in my data file, I'm going ahead and deleting this. So how do we add and delete? Click on plus to add, click on this to remove, and these options are to move your columns up and down. So if, for example, ID is my first column, if I have to move this to the top, click on this 1, 2, 3, and this is at the top. And now if I want my age column at the bottom, click on this and then click on down. It's there. So I'm getting it back to the position. Well, I'm going ahead and deleting this. So this is for addition, this is for deletion, this is for up and down selections of the columns that we have, and this will help in copying the selected columns. And this is when you have an XML file that has all the column names, and you can always import it using this, and you can always export it. Okay, this is to save as a generic schema. Why do we save as generic schema, and how can we do that, and how can we further use it? We will see in our upcoming sessions. For now, let's not save it. Let's go ahead and click on OK. Here you have specified your column names, and then you have ran this. Let me change back this to 5, and let's go ahead and clear and run the job. There you have all the data again onto the console. Here, couple of things with tlog row that we want to do. Tlog row, this component is basically printing whatever the data that it reads from the input file to the console. Here also we have the edit schema option. If you remember, we had an option asking if, let's do this. Okay, let me go ahead and say this is change the column name to state 1. Okay, and then I click on OK. So you see this window? This window is where whatever the schema that you have defined at the input component would be copied to your output component as well. So let's say you have a flow of components here, starting with input file, and then there is tlog row, and there is a tfile output delimited component also. When you click on propagate changes to yes, whatever the schema that you have designed here, it would go ahead and propagate to the further components that are there in a row, that are there in a job flow. This will help us in saving some time for not creating the schema multiple times. How is it helpful? Let me show that. For now, I'll say no. I'll come back, edit this to state 1, get this back to normal. And then now, since I have used propagate schema, yes, in my previous execution, I have all this created here. In case if I don't use that propagate schema option, it is an effort to manually create all the columns here again for this tlog_row component. When we do that, it automatically populates here. Sync columns is when you make some change here, you don't propagate changes, you come back to this tlog_row and then do a sync column. So whatever the changes that you have done at its previous component will only be affected to its next component or wherever you are doing a sync columns. So this, when you don't propagate and when you just do this, this is restricted only till here. If you have another component here like t output delimited, you will have to manually go and edit those schema and add those columns. If this is going out of your minds, relax. We will see how do we do that when we are doing a t output file delimited component. It's very easy, trust me. So now, what are the other options that we have with tlog_row? This is the basic where we have seen it's giving output with a pipe delimited console. We can also do to print it like a table. Let's select this, run it and see. There you see, it's in a tabular format. This is more easy to view and this is more easy to review your data. Well, we have another option also for the tlog_row where we use vertical. Let's go ahead and try this as well. Clear and run it. There you see, it gives the data in key value formats. So here there is name, there is age, and there is a value associated with that. So like this, you have it for all the columns that it is there in your data set. So you have 5 rows. For each of this, there is a key value that's created. I find it easy to always go with a tabular format. That's the table that helps me to view the data, all the data at one stretch in a tabular format. Okay, that's about tlog_row and t input file delimited. Alright,